Excuse me, I was speaking, I was muted and speaking for nothing. Apologies. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to attend the Novable and Scoutly webinar. I am Karim Hosny, Customer Success Manager for Novable, and I am joined today by Sander van der Blonk, CEO of Scoutly, and Olaf Maltha, Chief Product Officer of Scoutly, as well on one side. And the third speaker will be Laurent Kinet, CEO of Novable, and they will have the pleasure of talking to you today about innovation and corporate venturing, the AI tipping point. The webinar has a very simple structure. There will be a small introduction by me, and then the speakers will proceed to tell you how they see startup scouting and innovation. And we will conclude with a small Q&A session. So I would ask you to use the side tab that the app Livestorm gives to submit your questions at any time. We will go through them at the end of the event. With no further ado, let's get started. I think it's great to start with a question. So the question is not how important is innovation today. I think this is pretty obvious and evident, but rather when you are trying to innovate for your organization, how important is it to find a fitting startup? Now, to make this webinar a bit more interactive, we will be publishing some polls that I invite you to answer. It takes a few seconds. Again, to do this, you can just use the Livestorm interactive side menu. And so I'll do that. Publish it. I hope you can see it and that you can answer it. The reason why we asked this question is simple. The trend is undeniable, and we see that the amount of corporate venturing deals that are backed by capital is increasing. And it's not just increasing, it is peaking right now. As you can see, the difference between 2020 and 2021 is critical. This is probably also linked to the COVID crisis and the need for digitalization. So on the one side, there's more need to innovate and to bring new technology. But on the other side, we also see that, so it is really important to collaborate with startups if you want to stay relevant on the market. If you do not, then you run the risk of becoming a new Nokia and lagging behind and ultimately disappearing from the market. And this is backed up by research from notable institutions. But on the other side, there's also the dilemma of having so many new startups a year. One, it has been calculated that there may be as many as one startup created every 3 seconds, perhaps more. So how do you combine the two? How do you manage to innovate by investing or partnering up with a startup when there are so many that are created every day? So this is the challenge that we believe you should be looking into. So one, you should be ensuring that your innovation and investment strategies are aligned, which then is your sound, solid base to identify which startups match your needs to innovate. And from there, how do you establish a relationship with the startups? So without further ado, I will let the guest speakers tell you what they know about these subjects and the possible answers. So sensitize you to how you can overcome these obstacles, these modern day challenges. So I will introduce now Sandra van der Blonk and Olaf Maltha from Scoutly, who will begin, will take over from here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Karim. Hi, everyone. It's great seeing you, although at this distance. Let me dive straight in. So for the next 5 minutes, I'd like to talk about everyday realities for companies that want to collaborate with startups. And by that, I mean working together with, not owning per se. And Olaf, then my co-founder, will then elaborate on one crucial aspect in startup collaboration, namely identifying stakeholders and getting their buy-in, and how our platform helps you overcome some of the hurdles in doing so. As Karim said, we see companies strive for kind of a healthy mix between building internal capability and sourcing external expertise, products, technology, or talent from, amongst others, early and later stage startups. So in sum, startups have bottom line impact. Now, we research here at Scoutly, we research these daily practices, we research the good, best, and even next practice, and we know that working with startups, it's no easy feat to make it work. But hey, I mean, even if you were to collaborate internally, there are also a lot of obstacles to overcome. So in view of our seminar, we would like to walk you through some of these obstacles and aspects we hear often and how to go about that. First off, one of the aspects that companies feed back to us is that, well, we're not sure where we found the best startups. And this is related to the fear of missing out, but it's also related to what we call the hit-fit ratio. I'll give you an example. A top-tier VC sees about 2,000 startups for one investment, and we reckon that's about the same for collaborations, although it's a bit dependent upon the engagement mechanism. And it is what it is. To rephrase it a little bit, you have to kiss many frogs to find your prince, so you better prepare for that. Related to this is another aspect, and that is not so much the challenge of finding startups, but it's the challenge of finding the willing. And why are we saying this? Well, terms like showrooming or innovation theater were coined for a reason. And a lot of startups have become cautious and picky toward large enterprises. Plus, the real good startups, they have many options to choose from. So this is also something you have to prepare for. Well, and this is the perennial issue plaguing open innovation and with it also working with startups. How do you get your organization behind you? How do you ensure that people are really committed to working with external partners? And related also to this is that making decisions about startups is fraught with uncertainty, and decisions are often prone to personal agendas, and that results into kind of classic, traditional, long cycle decision making, and that probably your opportunity is gone. There's a bit of a research into how long does an opportunity last, and based on what we know, only 3 to 4 weeks. Mind you, that's the speed of startup decision making required today. So to conclude what we see here, bringing in startups triggers the immune system, as bringing in other companies for any type of collaboration. So how do you get your organization behind you? What we also noted is that still a lot of companies lack kind of a disciplined approach to startup sourcing, startup discovery, and the relationship side which follows, so the real engagement. And what's more, we noticed that a lot of attention, a lot of time is spent on just the sourcing side and maybe the contractual side, unlike testing the depth of a relationship and aligning the expectations. So if you read about failed collaborations, then in 90% of these times that has to do with this root cause, is that you have not spent time on aligning expectation and properly get to know each other and each other's needs. We have a simple piece of advice for you. If you're serious about working with startups, if you feel there is a business opportunity to meet, then you better organize this as a business process. And especially as there is now anecdotal evidence, and I'm quoting McKinsey here, research done last year and updated the beginning of this year, if I'm not mistaken, saying that companies that are into this game of working together with startups, and not just by acquiring a stake, a majority stake, controlling stake, or maybe taking a startup over, so simply the buying side, but really partnering with a startup, is that they foresee a shift taking place from having these exploratory programs, many to many, often outsourced to an accelerator, for example, or working together with startups in a many-to-many fashion in your own lab or startup studio, venture studio, what name you like to give there, a shift from exploratory programs towards more targeted one-on-one programs closer to the business. And you see then startups as a supplier or as a commercial partner, as a co-innovator. And the reason for this is really bottom line impact. They foresee that targeted collaborations can deliver impact, unlike the more exploratory programs. So to do so, for that, you need a process. What could the process be like? Well, you can look at it from varying angles. This is our view, and it's pretty simple and straightforward. So we believe you have to think through, what am I searching? What am I looking for? What do I like to solve? What kind of challenges do I have? Who should be involved? Then you embark on the startup discovery process, using maybe Novable for that. And then we believe is an important step here is then you start up very simple, sweet pilots. They can run a few hours, a few days, a few months, so you like. There can be a proof of concept, a proof of value, or building a capability prototype together, or doing a research experiment, and the outcome of which you take with you to make a calculated guess, make a decision on which startup collaboration you really would like to continue and scale it up to grow impact, because only things that scale deliver impact. Well, a more granular view of this is that in this process, you'll have ample decision points saying we go on or we don't go on, or we keep the startup for a later stage. And the name of the game really is to decide with less risk. This greenish mark area is where we help the process, making it more simple and more efficient. Or to put it differently, we help you deal with the fuzzy front end of collaboration. Now let's focus on this aspect called startup discovery, and I would like to invite Olaf to take it over and elaborate on one important aspect here called stakeholder management. Olaf, over to you.
Thank you, Sander, and good day, everyone. So we identify these 4 different stages within startup discovery. Things start off normally with some kind of inquiry from within the company, or maybe from an innovation team that kind of start an initial scope, maybe a very rough one with a general idea of what you'd be looking for. But it's a very important stage, the planning and scoping stage, where you really kick things off. I will be diving a little bit deeper into the stakeholder management part, where we believe that it's very important early on to bring in the right stakeholders, not just stakeholders, but the right stakeholders, and make sure that they're aligned around your scope, that they help you perfectionize your scope. And then the stage afterwards, and Laurent will be talking about this, is when we believe that if you have a proper scope set up and you have the right stakeholder team, you're ready to start scouting. And Laurent will talk about the challenges when you get to that stage, and how Novable, for example, can help with that through AI. And there's a last stage that we won't be touching much upon today, because it really stands a little bit on itself, and really want to focus on really getting started. Is the decision-making phase, where you vet and qualify startups and really get to that decision point. So, as I mentioned, one of the key conditions to success within the startup discovery we see as getting the buy-in from the right stakeholders. I think we've all been part of projects in our lifetime that maybe after months or maybe even years of work, a stakeholder or that we didn't know about, or maybe it was a stakeholder that we actually did know about and it was already part of our project. At the end of a project, maybe put the heels in the sand and put up a roadblock. It could be a logical roadblock, maybe a technology reason or a legal reason, but very often also we hear about emotional reasons that could have been taken away if people were more aligned up front. And so things like the fear of stakeholders, maybe conflicting priorities, it could be that person sees a direct impact on their own work or on the work of their department. Maybe it pushes them to a sidetrack. Maybe they don't believe that the quality from external development can be as good as internal. There's all sorts of emotional reasons that can also come up that you really want to catch. And obviously, you also want to catch all the kind of the contextual or the logical reasons up front as well. And so it's crucial to bring in stakeholders. And I think most innovation teams or most people working on innovation, they know at least a few key stakeholders. Often they know a decision maker, they know one or two topic experts, but the larger the organization, the more difficult it is to really identify the right stakeholders. If you know them directly within our platform, for example, we facilitate very easily to invite them. It's very simple. You assign them a role and you have a base team set up. But then how do you find stakeholders that you should know? So the ones that you don't know about, but that could have a big impact on your actual search. And so this is where you need to spread the word throughout your organization somehow. Within Scoutly, we created kind of a preview link to your scope where people within your organization can see that preview and get an idea of what you're working on. This can be sent to managers of different teams or a managing director of a sister company. You can put it in a newsletter. And it's an easy way to spread the word around your organization to have people be aware or become aware that you're working on this scope and that it might be of interest to them. And they can use that preview also to ask for access to your scope or to your stakeholder team and participate. And so it's a great way to cast kind of like a wide net throughout your organization and find those stakeholders that you really should know about. Ideally, you can also get stakeholders, obviously, to find you. If you have already an internal platform where you're running your innovation, maybe there is an overview where people can look at. We, at least within Scoutly SRM, created this kind of Trello type board where you see this quick preview of the different scopes that a company is working on. And people that are already participating on the platform can easily also through this way find additional projects that they should be part of or that they would like to be part of. So in the end, what you're targeting is a strong stakeholder team. You want to make sure that you have the right stakeholders. They have to have the right background, the right authorization. You want to make sure that they see the urgency for the scope. And you want to make sure that they feel accountable towards the project. And so within Scoutly SRM, we visualize this through a stakeholder map where we're mapping out these two parameters against each other. And you get kind of an idea of how strong is my stakeholder team? Are there any outliers that I need to talk to or that I need to review? Like it could be that somebody says, well, actually, I think this is not a very urgent project. So that's a great indicator for you really early on in the process to start talking to that person and find out, is this maybe not the right person? Or maybe there's something in our scope that they don't agree on or that they find that we need to change. And so with the use of this stakeholder map, we try to give you a good sense of how strong is your team. Do you have really the right team to start working? Now, not only do you need to bring them in, you also need to give them a voice, right? You want to create buy-in from your stakeholders. So they will actually actively work with you. They will put in the time that is needed, and they will participate and make sure that the goals that you set out are actually reached. And so within Scoutly SRM, we facilitate this through a proposal mechanism where every stakeholder is asked as soon as they join, they're asked to give their view on all the different elements of your scope. So you really start working together on perfectionizing your scope and making it as concrete as possible. You can have some conversations on all the different elements of your scope. And so you make a very kind of like transparent process where you include everyone and kind of create accountability also from your entire team, because they are part of the creation of the scope. They have had their voice. They automatically create some buy-in from your entire stakeholder team, and you make sure that you get out of the starting blocks properly and solidly. And so once you believe that you have that strong stakeholder team, and you have the buy-in on at least a pretty decent scope, we understand that, and we see that very often in the field as well, that scopes, they start off and get modified over time because of new insights, right? You start working maybe with a startup, or you discover a new technology that you also want to include. The scope can obviously change, but when you feel that it is at least solid enough to be relatively specific on what you're going to be looking for, we believe that you should start scouting, and that's where Laurent will highlight some of the challenges there and how that can be solved.
All right. Thank you very much to Olaf and Sander for sharing their insights on how to align your organization and get everybody on board before you start and to establish a relationship with startups. I would just like to let you know that there is a question for you that came in, and on considering what you just shared with everybody, I would like to publish a second poll again for the attendees. If you have a couple of seconds to answer it, we would like to know how important it is for you to establish working collaborations for your innovation strategies. And otherwise, I will not take more of your time. Laurent, please take it away.
Thank you, Karim. Hi, everyone, and congratulations, Sander and Olaf, for your insightful presentations. It's great to see how stakeholders' alignments and strategy formulation are so important to ensure successful innovation tracks. On my side, I will cover what happens just after that, when you finally nailed what you're looking for and need to find the most relevant startups to engage with. As Karim said at the beginning, there are so many startups popping up everywhere, evolving and dying at a rapid pace. And it becomes so difficult to find needles in a haystack, not only because there's too much of them out there, but also because the match between the need of the company and the real activity of the startup is the most important success factor. We could say that the intrinsic quality of a startup has little to do with its attractiveness to the company interested in. It's the matching that matters. And this is why startup databases cannot fill the gap entirely. If we look back to a short history of startup scouting, we see that the first step taken by companies towards startup venturing is serendipity. They rely on opportunistic encounters, an employee meets a friend in a bar, knowing someone who knows someone, etc., or just waiting for startups to contact them spontaneously. And when companies start structuring this activity, they use network-based activities like attending or organizing startup events, or inviting startups to hackathons, or hiring consultants to do the job. Well, you still don't have any technology at this stage, except email, maybe. So it becomes interesting when startup databases are being used. They are super useful to access a wide range of young companies, and you will find tons of information like location, headcount, financials, turnover, funding rounds, actually a lot of financial data. And most of companies we meet with Novable are at one of those three first steps of this ladder. Though very few actually are taking advantage of intelligence, even if we see a growing trend. The problem is that when you're stuck with databases, you can only rely on data. All the rest you have to do yourself, ideation, criteria, research, filtering, vetting, due diligence, and it's of course a massive workload. As I said, databases are super useful. I don't want to criticize them too much because they lead the market and they are a key step in the value chain, because without data, we couldn't add this intelligence layer. However, when it comes to innovation scouting, there's a few limitations. First, it's a one-size-fits-all solution. If your competitor will enter the same query as you, he will get the same results as you. But of course, your strategy is unique. It's like your DNA. So you need more granularity when working with strategy and innovation. Second limitation, already mentioned, they focus on financial data. But when you work in a company with an innovation-related position, you're not like investment funds. You need information, insights about the actual activity of startups, technology, methodology, products, USP, models, and that you won't find it extensively there. Third, last but not least, your search will retrieve long list of results, and you will have to browse them record by record to check if it fits your criteria or not. And even for high potential young analysts, it will take hours, thousands of hours. And this is what we have called the SAT syndrome. Professionals spending thousands of hours analyzing bad candidates that they will eventually disqualify. It's sad, of course, and it also refers to spot, analyze, drop, and repeat. Another limitation with current ways of scouting startups is that they disregard the fact that they are more than a name, a website, and a couple of numbers. Startups are in a web of interactions with a lot of stakeholders, founders, of course, but also employees, investors, partners, customers, suppliers. And they also produce a lot of content on their website, on their social media, in the news, in patents. You have, data is scattered all around the internet. And this data is truly a gold mine to create perfect matches between corporate needs and startup offerings. This is precisely where we have a qualitative leap in the startup scouting activity, because we switch from a search to a context thanks to AI. With a search, you must take the step. It's a push effort. You lean forward your keyboard and type a search, or you take a flight, or you hire a consultant firm. But with a context, we take the most out of the contextual data we gather about all startups worldwide. And this is the basis of the matching. With natural language processing, machine learning, network science, it becomes a pull curation process where we can delegate to the machine most of those tedious tasks while leaving you the final cut. As an analogy, all things considered, of course, 20 years ago, the search engine industry experienced a similar leap when Google removed Alta Vista from the map just by using website content and links between websites instead of directories and taxonomies. So the result of all this is that we can switch from generic lists with little information to ranked lists with information details. And I say ranked because ranking is key here, because it's what really brings value to scouting. Startups are sorted by their semantic proximity or distance between the organization's strategy and the actual activity and content produced by the startup itself. And this is where AI really brings value. In a nutshell, on the left, you get access to data, and on the right, it's the intelligence layer on top of this data that can turn a simple search into contextual delivery. Now, how can you do that? It's not the purpose here to make a demo, but this shows the fundamental difference between a keyword search and the brief taking by the computer. We want the machine to properly understand the innovation strategy, just like a consultant would do. So it's a kind of artificial consultant, let's say. So in Novable, you first tell the computer which use case you're working on, and this will adapt the algorithms accordingly. For instance, when you monitor your landscape, you will want to get broader results. And on the other hand, when you're looking for your needle in your haystack, you would want only spot-on startups in your list. And when you can submit your briefing, just like you would brief a consultant, as I said, in a meeting room, with long texts so that you can give details, express nuances, and develop the key elements of your search. And this briefing will be automatically and immediately vectorized. And through that process, Novable identifies and suggests topics based on your briefing from the most popular topics and expressions used by similar companies in your target community. So this way, your search will use common terms and words used by this target community, and therefore will increase the quality of the output. And next step in this brief-taking process is clustering, very interesting part. So the computer identifies clusters of topics and lets you weight each of them to make your briefing the most accurate possible, because the human brain is limited. So the way you word your briefing might not reflect the relative weight of different topics, so you have the opportunity to fix that here. And when you submit your campaign, the platform, the AI, retrieves the most relevant startups in real time, and you get ranked lists. And we call those ranked lists golden baskets. So you have your personalized ranking, where startups are ranked based on this semantic proximity score between your briefing and the startup's contextual information stock. And then you can tag and comment each result so that future deliveries will be improved. It's pure machine learning at work. And you will also notice that instead of focusing too much on financials, the platform first displays activity data, website, description, topics, Twitter, news feeds, and soon founders, patents, and other contextual data likely to facilitate the decision-making, whether it's a good fit or not. And so who's making use of this? Basically, any innovation-related role within an organization might run some startup scouting activities. And innovation professionals are, of course, at the forefront of this, mostly to ensure a constant feed of innovative ideas, inspiration, or potential threats, or just to feed the innovation culture and internal R&D. So let's say you're an innovation manager and your company strategy focuses on a couple of key topics or domains related to the future of your core business. Then you would run multiple campaigns in parallel on each of those topics that will automatically scan the startup landscape worldwide, spots initiatives falling into your radar, and calculates the proximity or the distance of these initiatives from your strategy. Another group using that kind of technology are corporate development teams, who obviously also need startup scouting for CVC or M&A, often with additional services to go one step further in the process, including analysis and contacts with stakeholders. And because technology spares you some time, extends your reach, and delivers super result super fast, but you can also need some extra expertise from an extended corporate venturing team who would manage the full process and deliver you with qualified candidates after having checked the potential, viability, financial health, and pre-vetted a real match with your needs. In an ideal scouting stack, and depending on your case, you would certainly need a smart combination of AI and human support. Next to that, procurement and purchasing teams more and more rely on innovation scouting to find new strategic partners, to solve new kinds of problems raised by business units. And we see rising interest from this function towards AI-powered scouting these days. And of course, investment funds, venture capital, is also interested in that kind of technology, and not especially to identify or spot the next investment target, but also to keep a grasp on their investments environments, their startup environments, their competitive landscape, and other insights, so that they can help them during board meetings. And next to that, we also have some unexpected case. As we know, it's the users who drive adoption and usage. And we encountered a couple of unexpected use cases, like, for instance, people, startups, or SMEs using Novable to monitor their competition, which is a great way to automate that kind of watch. We also have other companies using the technology to find twins, lookalike search, perfect clones of a given startup just to widen their choices. We also have some innovation managers using Novable to check if an idea they had was already implemented by a startup somewhere in the world. Hint, there is always a startup doing the same thing than your idea. And finally, we even have some cases where the scouting technology is used to retrieve qualified leads for sales or even marketing activities. So to conclude, I believe that the most interesting parts of using AI with corporate venturing are first the fact that we can delegate to the machine most of those tedious tasks usually done by humans, and the machine is never tired, never sick, never out, works 24/7 at constant speed. And second, the fact that the scouting reach is by default with AI unlimited, both horizontally with much more startups than before, and also vertically with much more contextual information for each of them. Looking at the time, okay, I think I'm done. Thank you for your attention, and happy to take your questions. Karim?
Yes, thank you, Laurent, for also sharing your insights on how startup scouting is going to change, or is changing already, the landscape, and AI is boosting these activities, these innovation activities. Before we start with the Q&A, I would like to ask if you have a question, by all means, go ahead and use the side menu to ask them. If you can just give me, if you want to address them specifically to a person. We have 3 questions that have come in, but before I start asking them, while we get ready for those, I'm going to publish a 3rd poll, which is going to ask you, how do you currently find startups? This is a very simple poll. We hope you don't mind answering this one as well, and thank you for your contribution so far. So to go to the questions, the first one, it was asked during the while Olaf was presenting, and but I'm not sure that I don't know who this question is for. So if it's for Sandra or Olaf, but the question is, how do you normally lead this discovery process? And I believe it's about when you were talking about the process.
I'll take that question, Karim. I'll take that question. Thanks for asking. The question is, who do you see normally lead the discovery process? Well, the obvious answer is it depends. It depends the governance in a company. Some companies are very centralized, other companies are very decentralized. If a company is very centralized, most probably they also like to centralize processes related to finding and vetting and qualifying startups, either organize it for inbound flow, solicited, or outbound flows using scouting companies, so have a single point of contact. And we see, depending on the kind of company, we see some companies really organized for this in a central way, and there's one person leading a team or 1 or 2 scouters or business developers, and this person has a role from business development lead to startup leader to open innovation leader up to strategist. If it were a very decentralized company, we see this discovery process taking place in many instances. It can be at a geographic national basis, it can be international. You can organize it with outposts. People in outposts have this process. So what we learned over the years, it's more important to look into this question of centralization, decentralization. Plus, if you organize for this, it has to do with the mandate the person has to lead this process. Is this person only responsible for spotting startups, or is he really responsible for driving business outcomes? it's a matter of how you slice and dice the discovery process, how far you get. Hopefully that answers the question.
Maybe there will be a follow-up question to that. We'll see. I have another question. This one is for Laurent from Sebastian. He's asking, you mentioned a startup scouting stack. Would this be technology only or something else?
Well, that's a great question. Like Sander, I'd say it mostly depends on your personal situation and company structure and goals. But basically, as I explained, I believe that even if new technologies like AI can bring very valuable benefits and speed up the full process with unprecedented reach and quality, it might not be enough to fulfill all needs when it comes to startup and innovation scouting. We have met at Novable quite a lot of companies who are curious about our technology, but are definitely more interested in the output itself. I mean, AI is a process, a mean to an end, a tool, a capability, and quite a lot of innovation professionals are even more interested in what AI can deliver. So they ask us to bring them results, to use our technology ourselves on their behalf, and in a way be an extension of their team. So I would say that a good scouting stack is made of the right tools and of the right expertise through a smart combination of both. This is how we think we can really bring value faster and better than with technology only or with expertise only. I hope it answered the question.
Hi, that was clear for me, Laurent. I have 2 more questions, so thank you everybody for your patience. The first one is for Olaf from Kevin. He thanks you for the presentation, and he asks, he says, how do I get my organization on board with my innovation strategy?
Okay. Good question as well. I'm also going to say it depends, as Sander and Laurent also kind of said. Obviously, it depends on how big your organization is and what stage you're at. But I guess in general, what we see is that people try to go too fast, too big at once, and kind of cause conflict within the organization or frustration within the organization. And so I would actually say to start light and to start on a scope and start working with the people in your organization that are willing to work on innovation, that are willing to work on the scope, that understand what you're really doing. And I think I personally, you're kind of dealing with change management, I guess, if you're really new to this type of process and to this type of startup discovery. I think personally, I believe a lot in transparency, and I think that's also the key in change management. Just it's also kind of the sort of the base of Scoutly, to be transparent and to create that transparency and get people involved and have them give their voice, and that way kind of pull them in instead of like putting things in their face and confronting them and only asking things from them, but just try to draw them into the conversation and into the decision making, and make them part of it, and take away any doubts that they might have, point them to maybe also very concretely, like, what are you trying to achieve, right? It's very important. That's why we say focus upfront on the scope and have the right people on board, and together make clear what are you really trying to achieve and what is the impact for the company also there potentially. So I think, start light, be transparent, and be concrete, I would say.
That sounds like very good advice to me, Olaf. Thank you. So we still have two questions. The first one is Nicolas asks, how, for Novable, so for Laurent, how are we applying AI to our search process?
Yeah. Well, I think it's not the purpose here to dig into technical details and AI architecture, but basically the Novable technology is based on two main foundations or two main pillars. The first is data, of course. So we have a stack of code and algorithms scraping the data, analyzing it through a gating system, and vectorizing all the content and data we can gather about those startups. So we have algorithms to define if this is startup, this is an innovative startup, if it still exists, and all that kind of things. And then it's vectorized with contextual elements. So data in one part, and on the other hand, we have a bunch of different algorithmic stacks, mostly with natural language processing for the matching, but also machine learning for improving the matching campaigns themselves. And we use different techniques and algorithms to improve that matching on a continuous improvement basis. So technically, I think it's not the place to dig deeper on that, but if you want more information about the AI as such, we can provide that to you, of course.
Great. And last one, I'll almost finish here. Lionel asks a very philosophical question. I think anybody who wants to join this discussion, he asks, if there is no startup in a domain, is it maybe too early? Is it possible to predict the potential creation of a startup in a specific scientific/technical domain based on papers, patents, market attractiveness, mindset of a university? I do not know if this is a joint effort from both Novable and Scoutly.
Well, I can quickly answer that. I guess what we can do already is, of course, drawing some insights and statistics and conclusions and predictive insights on what will happen next in the very near future based on the current actual rolling activity of startups, and apply there a couple of predictions based on the actual data. But for now, at least at Novable, we don't use scientific publications and academic research to do that kind of things, even if we will soon add patents and academic articles, but not to predict what will come next, to identify the right initiatives and the right startups. But I guess it would be possible at least to run some tests on that. But it's not what we are doing right now.
And I do not know if this is going to be a welcome question, but personally, from what I just read from Lionel's question, which I think is very interesting, how does Scoutly see this potential? So right now, there's a focus on the process of establishing the relationship, but what about helping in creating when there's no such activity yet? Just throwing it out there, but...
Yeah, well, just a short comment. I really like the question, but what we learned is that there are two things. First, more often than not, enterprises do not know what they search for, what they look for. So they like also this notion of serendipity, and also the process that Laurent explained. I think this is a great way to become acquainted or to become familiar with a startup that you probably never had thought about. And the second thing is that a lot of startups end up playing a different game compared to how they start. So you never know how to frame the space that they're in. So I'm not so sure whether you should define spaces, or be it tech spaces or application spaces. The real name of the game here is to come to a kind of a scope or a kind of an idea of what you're seeking. And then as Laurent said, let the machine do the work, because you never know what you will encounter.
Then maybe I will try to close this last philosophical concept by, indeed, I think it's the challenge also to let the creativity flow, and innovation needs creativity. So it might backfire to try to categorize things that don't exist just yet, as they might end up shaping corporations as well as startups. I think this is all we have. I thank very much all of our speakers and all of the attending, all of the participants. Thank you for joining us and for your time. You will be receiving a follow-up email just after the webinar. If you have any questions, you will be able to get in touch with both Scoutly and Novable. So please, please, please don't hesitate to do so. And see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.